Welcome to Ruby Data Structures, Introduction to Arrays. The prerequisites for this presentation will be some beginner Ruby syntax. So you'll want to know what the code on this screen is doing for the most part. If you don't know, it's okay. You'll still pick up a lot from this course. Feel free to follow along anyway. Hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll understand what an array is and how it works. You'll know the basics of how to access and modify the elements in an array. You'll know some common methods used on arrays, and we're going to go through a real-world use case where arrays can make analyzing a large data set much more efficient than a human trying to do the same thing. And we're going to do that by looking at household median income and trying to calculate what that value will be. Let's dive in. This is our first presentation on data structures. There are a couple different commonly used data structures in Ruby, the two most common being arrays, which we're going over today, and hashes. According to Wikipedia, a data structure is a particular way of organizing data in a computer so that it can be used efficiently. And as I said, we'll be digging into arrays today, and we'll do hashes a different day. So what is this array thing anyway? Well, the main thing to note about an array and what separates it from a hash is that it's integer indexed. Let's dig into what that actually means. So we can create a new array with this syntax with the capital A on array, .new. So we're basically calling .new on the array class. And we can set it equal to this ARR variable. Right now it's just going to return empty brackets, which is an empty array. Let's look at a different way to create a new array. We can just set a variable, guess, equal to an array that's already populated with some data. So here we're creating an array to hold a list of guests that we're going to have come to our dinner party. We can access the different values in an array using their index. We're looking at guest index 0, which will return Zach. The important thing to note here is that every array starts with an index of 0, not 1. So if you take anything from this entire presentation, just remember, always starts with 0. So if we look at the index of 1, we're going to see that Jill gets returned. And then we have this other syntax we can use. So we've got guess 2, 3. Now, that's a little bit weird because at first thought we might think this is going to take guess that index 2 and guess that index 3, but that's not what's actually going to happen. What is going to happen here is that we're taking guess starting at index 2, which is the first argument passed, getting 3 total values back. So it's giving us index 2, 3, and 4. So the second argument here is the number of values you want returned. So we're going to dig into some different methods that can be used on arrays here, and we're just going over some of the more commonly used ones during this presentation. But please check out the Ruby docs for a complete list of all of the methods that you can use on an array. Okay, so let's look at some different ways that we can access elements in an array. We're going to use the same guest list, and we've already gone over using this bracket notation with the index inside. You can see that you can pass an index that's outside because there are not 10 indices in this array, and you'll get nil returned, but Ruby won't break and throw an error. You'll just get nil. Keep that in mind when you're writing your programs because sometimes the errors are actually helpful because it puts it right in our face something's wrong, whereas getting nil value returned doesn't immediately show what the problem is with your code. Another way you can access the values in an array is with this .at method. It works the same way, you just pass the index that you want. Pretty simple. You can also use .first, returns the first value in an array, .last, the last value, nothing crazy there. How do you think we can get Zach and Jill? Well, we can use .first too. Now, adding elements to an array, we can use the bracket notation again and just say array at 0 equals first and array at 4 equals fifth. And then this array is going to look weird because we haven't passed anything for the indices of 1, 2, or 3. So what's going to happen is Ruby's going to go ahead and fill those in for us. Again, no error, just populating it with nil. Some other methods that we can use to add elements to the array are .push. That just adds whatever value you pass to it to the end of the array. Unshift is a cool one because it takes everything in your array and moves it over and puts whatever value you pass to it at the beginning, which is cool, but you have to be careful because every index that you had before has now moved. So where first was index 0, now it's going to be 1. So unshift can break your programs. Make sure you account for this in your code. Let's create a new array, numbers, and give it some values. Try to figure out a way how we can make this 0, 1, 2, 6 actually count from 0 to 6. And we can do that by using a .insert method. Now the way .insert works is that its first argument is the index that you want to start inserting at, and then every argument after that is what you want to pass into it. So in this case, we want to start at index 3, and we're going to pass 3, 4, 5, the missing numbers, and now we've got our complete array of numbers. Here we've got a different array of numbers. We can use .pop, which just takes the last number, or the last value, out of the array and returns it. So now we see 9 is gone. We've got this delete at method. It just takes the index as the argument. If we put 1 in there, we got the 6 popped out of there. And then we have the just delete method, which works differently because whatever value you pass to delete removes every instance of that value from the array. So in this case, all of the 7s are going to be gone now. Sometimes it's useful to get details about an array. If we have a guest list and we want to know how many people are coming, we can use .size, and that will tell us how many people are coming to our dinner party. With 5, it's not that big of a deal because we can quickly count and see, okay, there's 5 values in this array. But you can imagine some other data sets that might be hundreds or thousands of values that would take forever to count. So .size is a great one. .count is cool because it actually accepts an argument. .size, I believe, does not accept an argument. So in .count, you can count the instances of a particular value. So if we count Rushi, we have 1 Rushi coming to our dinner party. .include is cool. It iterates over your entire array to check to see if the value that you pass to it is included inside of that array. We want to know if Zach's coming to our dinner party. Well, he is. Here's an interesting one. If you pass a partial string to the array, will .include still show it? False. So the value has to match exactly for .include to work. So here we have another array of numbers. .unique is super useful because there's a lot of times we'll get duplicate data in our data structures and we only want the unique values. So .unique will give us just the unique values. But now if we inspect nums again, we see that it's still exactly the same as the original array. Well, that's frustrating because we just want the unique numbers. Now, without getting into a whole lot about return values and when it makes sense to actually modify the variable, let's just see how we can modify the variable here. If we use .unique with a bang, it returns the unique numbers, and nums, the variable itself, has also changed. Be aware of that because there's different times and different use cases for each. Now, .sort is super helpful. Basically, it just puts everything in either numerical order or alphabetical order if you're working with strings. So let's take a look now at how we can make data analysis a little bit more efficient using Ruby and the array data structure. We want to calculate the median household income from a large data set of, say, 10,000 people. So the first thing we would do is create a new array that's going to hold all of these incomes. In this case, we're assuming that you guys haven't gone over object-oriented programming yet. And so we're going to input all these values ourselves, theoretically, using .push. So we're going to do this 10,000 times for every income. Don't worry, we're not actually going to do this 10,000 times. But for now, imagine that we are. So we've got this incomes array, and it's full of 10,000 different incomes. Well, we need to put all of those incomes in order next, so we can use the .sort method. So here we go now. We've got everything in numerical order. Finding the median means just finding the value in the middle of this sorted data set. We have this dot size method that we learned, which we can call to give us the size of the data set. And then if we divide that by 2, it should give us the median index of the array, which would be 5,000 if we had 10,000 values. So if we want to pull that value out of there, we can do incomes.at incomes.size divided by 2. And I left the s off of that. So if you're following along, make sure you type in the s on incomes. And then it's going to give us our median value of, say, 47,000. Cool. So let's actually see this happening in action now. I'm going to open up Sublime Text and put in some of this code here. We can use the rand method, which will give us random values anywhere between 0 and, say, 200,000. So we don't actually have to input all of this data ourselves. Now, if you're thinking about a real-world use case, this would probably be a web application where people collecting this data could just type in each piece of data that they collect into a web form. But we're just going to simulate this now using random values instead of building an entire web application, and we'll get the same gist from it. All right, so we've got our code pasted into Sublime Text now. And we have this method in Ruby that's very nice. It's called .times. And basically what this code block is going to do is perform what's inside of it 10,000 times, which is pushing a random number into the incomes array. Let's take a look at what incomes looks like after we've pushed all of these random numbers into it. And if you're using Sublime Text, you can save your file and push Command B to build your code. Wow, okay, so we're inspecting this incomes array now. And it is quite large. That's 10,000 numbers in there. Now, if we wanted to sort all of that by hand, that would take a really long time. But let's see how quickly Ruby can do that for us. And it's sorted. That's pretty awesome. So now, again, we've got this data set sorted, and we just need the median value, which we can do by setting a variable median equal to the incomes at half of the length of the array. So let's see what that value is. And our median income is 99,922. Now this is going to change every time, so if we build it again, we'll get a different value. But it's still close, and that's because we're using this random number assigner. So it's going to be different every time. But that just gives you an idea of how quickly Ruby can perform tasks that would take a human a very long time. So there you have it, a very simple example of how using arrays in Ruby can make data analysis much more efficient than if you were trying to do it by hand. Hopefully that gives you a better idea of arrays and how their indices work and some of the methods that you can use. I encourage you to try out some different methods that you find in the Ruby docs and see what you can do. For those of you watching live, we will be sticking around to answer your questions, and we'll see you at the next webcast. Thanks for watching. Bye.